It's episode 14 of season 2 of the Exit Philosophy podcast. He is Rich Griffin. I'm Scott MacArthur, and we're coming to you on this Tuesday, April the 9th. We decided to push back our usual record date by one day for a second straight week so that we could recap the home opener, and the Blue Jays played it last night. Played a very clean, played a very efficient game against the Seattle Mariners, got the win. So as we sit here, their record is 5-6 through 11 games. And Griff, we got to talk about Monday night's home opener. We got to recap the rest of the road trip, some of the ups, some of the downs, some of the concerns here with this group early on in the season. But one thing is for sure, baseball being an everyday sport, when you podcast about it and you do it by the week, you got a bunch to get to.
Yeah. I was at the opener on Monday night, and we were talking off air. It just didn't feel the new stadium renovations were great and impressive, but there are still some complaints that we'll get to a little later. But in terms of the feel of opening day, I mean, like we've discussed, this was my 52nd. And it just didn't have the feel of when this team was playoff bound and good and fan favorites, especially starting in the 2015 season at the trade deadline in 2015. And since then, they went through the doldrums of 2017 to 2020. But it just seemed like a large media crowd on the field pregame. There wasn't a buzz in the stands. There weren't the stages built on the field for local radio talk shows, sports talk shows like Bob McCown and Tim and Sid, whoever normally was doing it back in those days. And it just didn't have the feel. And the buzz in the stadium pregame was not huge. And when the intros were made, it was like polite applause. There was not one or two players or coaches or personnel that stood out and got bigger ovations. I think Jordan Romano got a nice ovation, Davis Schneider, Pete Walker, and Barrios maybe. But it just was routine, and it didn't have that opening day feel. The stadium was basically the pregame show.
Okay, so I agree with you. Did that surprise you? Because, Griff, I got to say, look, there's been a lot to digest. I mean, this is the first time that a home crowd has gotten a look at this team since the end of in person, since the end of the regular season last year, because we know that the Blue Jays went on and played in Minnesota for those two playoff games. There's that. There's how last season ended. And like last year, there are 10 road games to digest heading into the home opener. And, well, they fit into my window. I said a 5-5 or a 4-6 road trip would be acceptable.
I think 5-5 would have been successful. I don't think anyone was suggesting 6-4, but 4-6 that they came home. I was suggesting 6-4, but I'm the only one.
Yeah, you were way optimistic.
I said 5-5 would be fine, and 4-6 would be acceptable. They came back 4-6, and it seemed somehow that was far less than acceptable.
Well, what I said was 4-6 fits in the window, and I will stick to that. I was okay with it as long as they weren't getting their ass kicked every night. And you know what? They didn't get their ass kicked every night. They got their ass kicked twice in Tampa Bay, but they also kicked Tampa Bay's ass twice. So, that's a saw-off. The game in New York on Saturday was a blowout until it wasn't, and they almost clawed their way back with that ninth inning rally that had everybody on their toes. And unfortunately, George Springer got a little too aggressive and struck himself out against Clay Holmes. So they showed some fight there. I think, though, Griff, and again, getting your ass kicked versus not, and blah, blah, blah. What does a 4-6 look like? There are red flags about the offense. I mean, they get no hit, and you and I talked a week ago, the day after the no-hitter by Ronel Blanco in Houston. That series would continue. Davis Schneider played the hero off of Josh Hader in the top of the ninth, turning a 1-0 loss into a 2-1 win. So that was a this close. If you're not watching on youtube.com/exit philosophy, I'm holding my thumb and index finger very close together, this close to being another shutout loss. And then that next night in Houston, they get one hit by the Astros. And keep in mind, this is not a Verlander Astros team right now. He's hurt. This is not an Urquidy Astros team right now. He's hurt. So, 4-6 fits my window, but there are some PTSD.
It's a very
disappointing
4-6, and when they sold out the new look Rogers Center, 40,000. So it's the basic seating capacity is 39,000 plus, and then they'll add the general admission, the alcoholics who go to the bar and just stand there and watch the game. So it was 40,000 and change and a sellout. And the difference to me is that you can sell out a stadium with baseball fans, but you can't create standing ovations with Blue Jays fans. I mean, there's enough baseball fans we know that are going to pack that place, but they can go in there ornery and angry, which it seemed to me the case yesterday. Because, I mean, opening day and your manager's getting a smattering of boos as he goes to the mound, and the hitting coach. I mean, that's
wasn't a smattering when he came to get Barrios.
Yeah,
it was a smattering during opening introductions, and then it was a full-on.
Yeah, after the game, the first question that I asked in his post game was whether he had to suppress a smile as he walked to the mound and the fans were booing him because of taking Barrios out. And I thought it would be a way for him to get closure and smile and just say, yeah, that was. I did think of that as I was going out, but he did not react well. And so it still eats at him, I'm sure, as did the pre-game non-ovation on the baselines when they were being introduced. But to me, these fans are like doubting Thomases that need the Jays to prove to them that they are again going to be contenders, just as everyone in that clubhouse is promising, just as the front office has promised since the end of last season. And, their baby right now, the front office with Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins, their baby is the new clubhouse and the new stadium, but especially the new clubhouse in terms of showing the players that this is a major league venue. And I don't think the fans give a rat's ass that they have a float pool where they imported the water from the Dead Sea or something, so what? Win some ball games.
Yeah, well, I've said this before, and I believe it to be true, but I could take this in 4 or 5 different directions now. I'll say this about John Schneider, and I'm going to stick up for him here, which may surprise some people, but I don't feel like I've ever come down hard on him. I'm more interested in the general manager scapegoating people when he thinks he's standing up for them, and just the general weirdness around that. I've never, really come out one way or the other on Schneider. I will say this for John. And I bet you he will. Who should pull Schneider aside when the Mets come into Toronto later this summer? John Gibbons. Because John Gibbons was John Schneider's age the first time he managed the Blue Jays. And that
didn't go well.
No. And it didn't go, and it wasn't easy. And he was considered the general manager's puppet.
Correct.
And he did not become the beloved figure that he became and keep in mind, he was not a beloved figure in 2013. No. Everybody's like, Alex Anthopoulos made the trades with the Marlins and the Mets then to get Dickey, and they've got this star-studded team, and you're bringing back John Gibbons? Like, what? It wasn't a popular hire the second time when it happened. John Gibbons, 2 things. The second half of the 2015 season, and John Gibbons being into his mid-50s by that point, where his give a bleep meter, he was more comfortable in his skin, started to have some success on the field, had the right mix of players, and he started to let stuff wash off of him, Griff. And I think I've told this story on the podcast before. If I haven't, I've told it to others so many times that I forget where I've told it or not. But one of the first interactions I had with John Gibbons, one-on-one. So I started covering the team in 2013, which was his first year back, the second time. And I remember being in his office at the Rogers Center, and, the media sort of did its thing pregame, and we all left the room. And I was the last one. I had my back to him as I was about to walk out the door. He's like, "Scotty, come back in here for a sec." And I didn't really know him that well. So I was like, am I about to get dressed down? Did I write something? Did I say something? Because that was possible. He said, "Close the door." I said, "Close the door." And so I did. And he said, "Sit down a second." And this is where I realized John Gibbons was just a guy, just a true human being. And he's just like, "Scotty, why don't they like me?" And, I didn't really have an answer for that. All I said was, "Gibby, you got to win. You got to win. They've been starving here for a winning team for a long time." And also keep in mind, it was 2013. We were 5 years removed from the end of the George W. Bush presidency. And I said, "Gibby, until you win, your accent is going to remind people of someone and things they don't like. Whether that's fair to you or not, there's a little bit of that. You're a Texan up here. You haven't had a lot of success. Alex brought you back as a safety net, da-da-da-da-da." I said, "It'll all change if you win." And I really think when they started to win, John Gibbons kind of found his authentic self. And that's what if he could sort of impart that wisdom to John Schneider, because Griff, you asked that question, and anybody who knows you will ask the hard question, but also sometimes you'll ask a difficult question wrapped in humor to take the edge off. And it gives the answerer of that question the opportunity to shine if he interprets it the right way. And Schneider is so tied up and bound right now by, he just needs somebody to say, "Schneids, it's gonna be okay. Just be you."
Yeah, that was the reaction. You know me well. That was the reaction I was looking for from John Schneider, and he spit the bit. And that's a brilliant idea, to get John Gibbons to talk to him when they come into town, or I don't know where they play. I think it's
Toronto this year.
Yeah. Because no matter what people think, John Gibbons had wisdom in him that people didn't appreciate, and you just outlined it pretty well. There were, again, back to last night, there were a couple of things there were a lot of things that struck me. One of them was, it was nice that they brought Louis Rivera in to throw out the ceremonial pitch.
Yes.
I thought that was a nice touch. The other was, I smiled when they were doing the player intros and the field was ringed by construction workers. Usually it's like first responders after an emergency or whatever, but these construction workers are the heroes for the Jays front office, because they help get this thing ready in time. And I just thought, well, that's the difference. These guys are proud of what they did to generate more revenue and change people's seats, and these are the guys that did it. Hell, they were a biker and a cop short of the Village people.
But the Jays had just been at Yankee Stadium all weekend, where YMCA plays in the middle of the sixth inning, right? The ground crew starts doing the whole deal. Yeah.
And there were some, again, we're talking, and we talked about this before we started the show, but there were some complaints that came out of left field, literally. One of them was the camera view from center field, and you said you were watching in an establishment video, but you said you didn't notice much of a difference, but the complaints are that the shot is too wide. It makes you seem, because that's the shot you get on every pitch, is from center field to the hitter to home behind home plate. And what was your impression? Because there were a lot of people thinking that the camera shot was too wide. And my belief is that they needed to maintain that width, because that was the width of the Rogers signs behind home plate, the TD signs behind home plate. And they're selling this to try and pay for the new stadium. So it might be something that can't be changed. But what were your impressions? You said you didn't really notice.
Yeah, you and I, so I'll acknowledge, like, it's been, and I've shared a little bit about this on our show. I'm back in the GTA right now, and I'm spending a lot of time in a hospital with a friend who's not well. And so a few of us who are close friends of this friend went out last night. Shout out Earls at Yorkdale. And so we were just having a couple of drinks and dinner and visiting late. And so I kept my eyes on the game on one of the bar TVs and did my best to sort of know the score and keep track of the big moments and get a glimpse of what was going on. I did watch Jays in 30 today, this morning on my Sportsnet app, so that and I ran it on my laptop. So I had a better sense of just the overall flow of the game in a short, compacted way, and some of the views. Griff, it has a bigger time feel to me. Now, that's just a comment. I don't have an opinion whether that's good or whether that's bad. And I think aesthetically, it's quite impressive. That's my take. It looks bigger time to me now. Yeah. So I'm positive on it. And also, you know, the way that you describe it, I can see a wider center field camera, but like, it's not anything different than, say, what you get at Dodger Stadium. Yeah. Now go back and watch a clip of the Kirk Gibson home run off of Dennis Eckersley in 1988. There was no seating. It was just a big padded wall behind, and then everybody sat up higher at Dodger Stadium. The more expensive lower bowl seats now have since been inserted in the last 20 or so years, whatever it was when the Dodgers put those in. It's similar here. You know, we can think whatever we want about, it's just for the bourgeois and blah, blah, blah. But aesthetically, to me, it looks good. And I honestly think these are adjustments that people will just come to accept. By home game number 5, people will be used to it. It's just different on night 1. So you have a reaction and you type it on X and other people agree and it becomes a thing. I really don't think it's that big a deal.
Plus, if they were 8-2 coming home, I don't think there would have been that many complaints about that.
People would be running to TD to open bank accounts if they were 8-2, right?
But another complaint, and I noticed in some of the links that were sent attached to the tweets, is that the sort of volume of color coming out of those bands behind home plate with the Rogers and TD is like, it attacks your senses. And I'm thinking they should hand out those eclipse glasses just to watch the game in person from center field. But yeah, they were bright, and it does remind of a video game, but a younger crowd does not object to stuff like that because they play a lot of video games. And so I think it's more of an older crowd that's not happy with a 4-6 team coming home. Yeah, and I agree with you. Like, the same way that John Schneider will be forgiven as the season goes on if there's more victories, so will the wide angle from center field be forgiven if this team starts to win regularly.
Yeah, and I know we're bouncing around just with some stuff. Go back to Schneider. I gotta say, I felt for the guy when he came to get Barrios with 2 outs in the 7th last night. I mean, it was the right move.
You knew it was going to happen. You knew.
Yeah, but call me mushy. Call me woke. Call me a snowflake. I actually felt for the guy just because, I mean, we all know it wasn't him last October, and he's got to wear it. And I mean, it was the right call. The game, it was actually kind of the perfect result. Obviously win, but like the way the game played out, Griff, it was just sort of a neat and tidy 1 through 9 inning slate for the Jays, and I think they badly needed that.
Yeah, and the one in-game highlight, since we're talking about that, and that was not so neat, but turned out great, was the throw from Kevin Kiermaier to IKF at third base.
Yes,
as France was trying to go from first to third, and IKF had the ball 10 feet in advance of the runner, and he just came up on the tag and didn't get him till the foot was on the bag. And it seemed like he was scared. If there were that many people scared of France back in the day, World War II would have been a lot quicker. Just saying.
I'm thinking of the name Ty, and I'm trying to come up with a response that includes Ty, and I don't know if it's today or if it's every day, Griff. I'm just not quick enough on the uptake to have a good comeback for you.
I did ask that question about that specific play to Barrios and to Kevin and to John Schneider, and Barrios was interesting because he said that 2 years ago, I asked 2 years ago, would you have been able to rebound from that play at third base by striking out the next hitter and getting a ground ball to end the inning? And he said no. So that's a good admission from a guy who now, to me, is one. He might be. To me, he's the ace of this pitching staff. There's been no doubt. Gosman struggled out of spring training with the shoulder, and then had the built-in excuse at Yankee Stadium of it being 4 degrees or 5 degrees, whatever. And the first time since Bradenton on March 25th that he had pitched outdoors. But, we don't want to hear excuses. We want to see performance. And
the judge homer.
Yeah.
The judge homer off Gosman was a no doubter. The Stanton homer was a Yankee Stadium special.
Right.
But that doesn't matter. Vladdy can take advantage of it just the same when the Jays play there, right? So.
And Barrios, I mean, to me, one of the most amazing stats is the fact that in 7+ years, he's never missed taking the ball every 5 days and going out there and throwing. That's just an amazing stat, especially at this time of where everybody's talking about the reasons for so many pitching injuries. So many, and everybody's got different reasons. Players Association, for some reason, is blaming it on the 2-second savings with runners on base on the pitch clock and the original move to institute the pitch clock, which I don't see as like, I think it's an artificial reasoning created by the Players Association to fight back against MLB.
Ken Rosenthal has an article on that right now in The Athletic. If you're a subscriber, it's really interesting. And on that topic, Griff, and I've watched the Jays so far this year, like you, and the guy who came to mind for me was Nate Pearson. Now, not because of injury. I know that this is an injury-related topic, and we do know Nate's had some injuries as he's attempted to break through into the major leagues. But one of the cruxes of the article is this sort of desire by maybe even pitcher, but certainly their teams, for like spurts of success, being madly in love with the radar gun and different things like that, something that isn't sustainable over the long term. And somebody might say, well, Scott, Justin Verlander's been generally healthy, not entirely in the last few years, but for his 2-decade career, generally healthy. And I would say to you, yeah, he's an outlier, in the same way Nolan Ryan was an outlier. There were far more people who weren't healthy than were in Nolan Ryan's time when they were flamethrowers like that. Same deal now. And where it hit me with Nate Pearson was, Sportsnet did that thing 2 or 3 years ago. Will Nate Pearson throw 110 and
Right.
miles an hour. And it was predicated on Pearson's desire to throw a pitch that hard. And it's like, dude, do you want to be a pitcher? Like a guy who goes out there and has success? Or do you want to be a guy who excites the metrics humpers and becomes a very brief showpiece as a guy who accomplished something on a radar gun once, but never really had a career? And so Griff, what I wonder is, are some of these guys learning less how to pitch and are chasing sort of wow moments that might play on social media briefly or might make you an instant but not necessarily long-standing celebrity?
Okay, here's
you
my
make money over 15 years if you're successful.
if you can stay on the field, on the mound. But here's my theory on the number of pitching injuries, and this is from someone who has been in the game for 52 years. So I've seen a lot of things going on. And last week we talked about it, and I offered that my thought was it's the max velocity. They're throwing hard all the time. But then beyond that, beyond the desire to be high 90s and to have a bullpen full of guys that can touch 100 from time to time, is how you get there. And I remember when in the mid 70s, when guys were throwing hard, the perfect pitcher's body was 6'3", 185 pounds. If you could get a pitcher like that, you say, hey, that guy's got a pitcher's body. He's a guy who's gonna dominate. And then, like, I did a study for the Expos in 1975 on heights and weights of major league players all around baseball to get averages and where the Expos stood. And Steve Renko was 220 pounds, pitched for the Expos for many years in the early years. And I found that there were only 40 guys in the National League that weighed over 210 pounds. Now you get shortstops weighing over 210. Now you get guys throwing 94 and saying, I can add to that. Pitchers going to the weight room and adding that extra 2 or 3 miles per hour. I remember how it affected, and the body's frame is only built to carry so much weight. I remember Mark McGwire suffered fallen arches after his workout.
Your tendons don't grow and like the muscles do. Yeah.
Guys who lift weights too much and were in the steroid era, which obviously creates the ability to lift weights more often. We're tearing biceps. We're tearing calf muscles, and to me, that can't not have an effect on pitchers who are trying to amp up their velocity and then go to the weight room to get that last 2 or 3 miles per hour that'll put them over the top. You look at the Blue Jays starting staff. You look at Barrios. He goes to the weight room, but doesn't. You look at his arms. You look at his body. You look at Kikuchi. You look at Gausman. You know,
kind of regular dudes.
Yeah,
Gausman's lanky.
Guys.
Yeah.
And everybody goes, oh, they're lucky that they had 130 starts from their top 4 guys last year. Well, maybe it's not luck. Maybe it's the fact that these guys don't chase that last 2 or 3 miles per hour fastball. And meanwhile, guys that do are and got money early and bonuses because they were throwing that hard in college and high school. Those are the guys that are ending up on the IL. Well, the Jays are at the back of the NASCAR pack, and as these wrecks go off to the side, maybe they'll be able to sort of slide through and get to the podium.
I remember asking Gibby and Pete Walker and a bunch of different people. I can't remember what year it was, 14, probably 15, maybe. I was like, would Mark Burley be drafted if he was 18 or 21 years old coming out of high school or college today? Would he be drafted? Now, Burley hit 90 pretty consistently as a younger pitcher, but was not, he was an upper 80s with his fastball. I always laugh, Griff. There was one night in St. Petersburg. Burley's first pitch of the game was an 84-mile-an-hour fastball, according to the scoreboard, and his second pitch was an 83-mile-an-hour changeup, according to the scoreboard. Now, that's the scoreboard, right? Like, I just thought, like, okay. But it just serves to illustrate the humor behind that and the fact that Burley wasn't a hard thrower. But would he even get a sniff? And yet you look at his career and how successful he was, but everybody's chasing radar gun now. And, and then on top of that, it's like Shane Bieber. Shane Bieber is awesome. And you know what Shane Bieber is now? Because he's down for the year again. He's just a persistent injury case. And it's sad because he is a great pitcher who's not going to be remembered as a great pitcher because he just couldn't stay on the field into his late 20s and into his 30s.
I hear it on every team's broadcast, but when there's a kid coming up and he comes out of the bullpen and he throws 99 and he misses high in the zone, throws 99, backs the guy off a plate. Announcers, broadcasters always say, and I hate it, they go, well, when you throw that hard, you can get away with a mistake now and then. And Mark Burley is a guy who didn't count on that. I don't need to throw 99, 98, 92 because he doesn't make mistakes when he locates his pitches. He can throw to all quadrants with all pitches, and that's what we call a pitcher.
Yeah, and like I'm thinking of the Marlins as well, like Sandy Alcantara. And Yuri Perez just went down for the season. Was it his second start that he blew his arm out? Maybe his first, but the Marlins are off to a terrible start. Just got their first win on Sunday in St. Louis. They were 1-9 to start the year. Like, it's just.
How about Brandon Barriera, the one of the Blue Jays' top draft picks?
Yeah,
I remember on draft day he got on stage and he very cocky said, I'm going to make 19 other teams regret that they'll pass me by. Now, there's a guy who is going to go and try and max his velocity and go to the weight room and try and take all those measures to prove people wrong. And now he's on the sideline, and I don't know how long he's out for. But it's a dangerous thing to be in the minor leagues and trying to accelerate your path to the major leagues, not via pitching, not via learning how to pitch, but learning how to throw hard, exit velocity.
But Griff, it's all tied in, right? It's all tied in. Like the idea now that as a starting pitcher, and I know that you lament this because you've said it before, but like guys will be looking into the dugout with one out in the sixth inning.
Yeah.
Because if you're a right-handed pitcher and you just like say give up a single or walk a guy, and the next hitter's a lefty, or two of the next three coming up are lefties, and there's a lefty warming up behind you in the bullpen, you're looking into the dugout because it's over. And so I think look, I'm not saying the data is the data, and third time through, starting pitchers clearly tired, the numbers get better, hitters are more familiar with the guy's repertoire that night, what's working, what isn't, how they're being attacked, get all of it. I understand that. But the mentality, if you're a starting pitcher, of I just got to go out and give my team 4 good innings or 5 good innings. You air it out more. You expend more in a shorter period of time because you're not Dave Stieb or Jimmy Key or Jack Morris thinking, I got to save something here in the first or second because I still want to be out here in the 8th or 9th.
Verlander's classic. He would throw 94 in the first few innings, and everybody would go, oh, his velocity's down. No, it's not. This is what he wants to be throwing in the first 3 innings, so that
he's running a marathon. He's not sprinting.
Yeah, 7th, 8th, and 9th, he'll be the Kenyan in the marathon. He'll be like gassing it up there at 98 miles an hour, and everybody's going, where did he get that from? Well, no, it's always been there. He was just saving it, and now he's no hitting your ass.
Right. It's like Chris Bassett in spring training last year. Don't worry that I'm throwing 91.
Right.
March 1st. I want to be healthy on October 1st.
I know we talked about this other issue before we went on, but I don't. Did we talk about my theory on the Blue Jays offense against good pitchers and crappy pitchers?
Okay, so the context for this is that, of course, Ronel Blanco no hit the Blue Jays a week ago Monday, and we're talking to you on Tuesday, April the 9th. So it's almost 8 nights ago. And that the Jays chased Luis Castillo in the fourth inning of the home opener, their victory over the Mariners. And Castillo is off to a slow start for Seattle, but had an awesome year last year. And, longtime Cincinnati Red, very good pitcher. So what's your theory on why the Jays might have better success against the Castillos of the world rather than the Blancos?
My theory is that the Ronel Blancos of the world are looking for weaknesses and the lineup they're about to face, because their strengths aren't good enough to get good major league hitters out. So they're looking for the weaknesses of the opposing team. And Luis Castillo knows his strengths, believes that his strengths are elite, and he's going to come after you with those strengths no matter what your lineup is. And the Blue Jays study so much video from past performance that when they study Luis Castillo and his last three starts, they're seeing what they're going to get. So they can be better prepared coming out of the blocks against Luis Castillo and the elite pitchers in baseball who all do the same thing. I'm pitching to my strength. Here it is, hit it. Than the Blancos, who have to sort of trick, pitch backwards, change from the last start that they had, and then instead of fastball, throw a change up, and even add pitches in the offseason. So until the Jays see these guys, I can assure that the next time Blanco pitches against the Blue Jays, they'll have a better idea, and it won't, the results will be far different. But for now, heading into this season, this team under offensive coordinator Don Mattingly is preparing the same way. And it works against elite pitchers. It doesn't work against crappy pitchers because they're trying to get you out by pitching to your weaknesses. That's my theory, and I'm sticking to it.
I saw during the Houston series, and I do my best to generally stay off of social media because I've come to appreciate sanity. I find that to be a valuable tool in my arsenal. But that a lot of the rage was directed at Don Mattingly.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and so I'm trying to think to myself, okay, like at some point, there needs to be the expectation on the personnel, or at some point there needs to be the expectation on the person who put the personnel together. Is Don Mattingly, and again, look, they're 5-6 now. We're a few days beyond this. They had a good home opener. It was a smooth game. They were in control the whole time. They got a great performance by Barrios. The bullpen did its job. God only knows what Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of this week, etc., will bring. But over the course of the long season, like, are we really going to hone in as a fan base on the hitting coach and or the offensive coordinator? Like, how many shields do the people who actually put this together need? If this is the path it's going to take, and I'm not saying it is, maybe this team is great. Maybe they win 95 games. I'll be pleasantly surprised, and I'll admit I was wrong and be glad about it, because it'll mean October baseball and home games in October if it happens.
I would suggest that Don Mattingly and Guillermo Martinez are just getting the spillover. Like the cup is overflowing of vitriol towards the GM and the president. So there's no more room to get all over Ross Atkins. So it spills over and goes to, because JP Ricciardi, at a time that he was actually speaking to me, has said something quite profound. He said, Toronto is the only major league city where people are so focused on the front office, on the GM, on the manager, and they give the players a bye. Instead of blaming players, they blame the front office, they blame the manager, they blame the president. And he said, and this was before Atkins and Shapiro. I mean, he was, like I'm thinking in my head, hey, JP, I remember when it was when you were hired and you were conducting the in stadium on the dugout Q&As and you were getting standing ovations, that you didn't think the same way as you are now. It's only when he started getting shit from everybody for crappy teams and for blaming his payroll that he came up with this theory. And
Brian Burke followed that with the Leafs too, right?
Yeah.
All the
but
accolades,
I mean,
when he was hired, and when it went sideways, it was everybody else's.
So basically, in Toronto, they'll get on players in hockey with the Leafs, but not so much in baseball. And there's a lot of really good baseball fans, probably among the most intelligent in Major League Baseball, but peripherally, the fans that fill the stadiums are the ones that don't quite understand the game as well. And it's not like hockey where I know from coaching baseball, youth baseball, that the parents think you're Merlin the magician every time you pull off a double steal or something, because they don't know what's going on. But in hockey, they're all yelling out instructions. Pat played hockey at the same time as baseball, and I didn't coach that because what do I know? And like every parent knew what the coach should be doing. And in baseball, every parent bows because they don't know what the coach should be doing. And that's a difference even in the major leagues, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of the players on the Blue Jays getting away with stuff that they wouldn't in Boston or New York or somewhere.
I just, I look at that lineup, Griff, and I still don't see it 1 through 9. Now,
let's talk about that, because they still have that same issue at second base, third base, and left field that we've been about since the beginning of spring training. I mean,
I'm leaning into the Dalton Varsho thing, and I understand the value of defense. I don't dismiss it. This guy's a Major League Baseball player. I'm not, never was. You put Dalton Varsho on a baseball field beside me, it's going to be very clear before a fungo ball is hit our way who's better. This is not like a crap on Dalton Varsho from just old me guy, but I'm looking, I'm like, I don't see it offensively. Obviously he's going to run into him and he's going to hit you 15 to 20, maybe in a good year 25 home runs. I just don't see at this point, and there have been enough years both in Arizona and last year with the Blue Jays, there's enough of a track record now that we just got to stop assuming that there's a whole lot more there offensively. I see holes in that swing. I see places that you can attack him and get him out. He is what he is.
Right.
He's a valuable piece of your team, but he's not this like cleanup hitter.
Yeah. If the Blue Jays, and specifically Ross Atkins, can get over the fact that they obtained Varsho for Gabby Moreno and Lourdes Gurriel Jr., and that trade is not working out, then they could start to use Varsho properly, which John Gibbons did yesterday, basically.
John Schneider, yeah.
John Schneider did. I got to be on my mind. John Schneider did yesterday, because he started the game with Davis Schneider in left field, and Varsho, his ideal role would be late inning if you really need him to pinch hit, or if you have a lead, put him in left field, and then you'll still have Kiermaier in center field, or if Kiermaier's getting a day off, you put Varsho out there to play. So he'd be a part-time center fielder, a defensive replacement in left, and obviously if there's an injury in the outfield, he would get regular everyday playing time. But at this point, with the performance he's put out there and the struggles that the Blue Jays are having scoring runs, Dalton Varsho should not be an everyday player, especially, as you said earlier in the year, batting fourth or fifth in the order. And so that should be his role if they can accept that they made a bad deal.
But Griff, you're talking about the issues at second and third and how those will all work out. Like Isaiah Kiner Falefa, let's just be clear here. I mean, that's 2 years and $15 million.
Yeah,
They did,
I think there's too much made always about money. Like, what can he?
Griff, they did not sign him to sit on the bench. Now, they may not have signed him to play a specific position. They can bounce him around the outfield. They can, and that'll probably happen over the course of the season. Play a little second, play a little third. But he's going to be in the lineup because they're going to have a hard time, at least in the early days, selling a contract like that and having him pinned to the bench.
I thought he would be the replacement for Whit Merrifield in terms of role and expectations, which means that Whit Merrifield didn't start out the year as the everyday second baseman. He earned it at some point. So IKF would have been given the opportunity through his play to earn a spot, but not be handed it.
Yeah.
Right now I asked John Schneider pregame yesterday if he's figured out a rotation at second, third, and left. And he said basically that he's happy with all of them. He knows what they can do. He feels he can play them anywhere. And he mentioned Davis Schneider as an outfielder and last as a second baseman. I mean, we saw him come out defensively. Late last year, even at second base, he was coming out defensively. And in left field yesterday, Varsho came in defensively. So,
and I don't know what
when you're struggling to score runs as a team that you've got a guy who can hit a mistake.
Yeah, like Schneider saves your ass. And I know this got play in the fan base. So I'm going back to the low-hanging fruit. But Schneider saves your ass off Josh Hader in the middle game in Houston. Turns what would have been a second consecutive shutout loss and an anemic night offensively, the night after a no-hitter, into a 2-1 win, and then doesn't play the next day. And I know that there's
too much made out of that. There's like 158 games left.
I'm not saying
a guy the next day. The next start that Schneider had, he went 0 for 4, but that was 2 days later, and nobody said anything about that.
Right. But the whole thing about him not playing the next night was that he struggles with 4-seamers up, and that was
which he does.
So they were going to get a steady diet of those. I'm not saying you reward the guy. I'm just saying, Griff, I'm looking at the options.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying.
Well, there's
it's not Davis Schneider needs to be in the lineup because he hit a game-saving and turns out to be game-winning home run the night before, and he must be rewarded and you must pat him on the back. It's more like I'm looking around and I'll take a chance that maybe one of those 4-seamers don't ride up and they and ride right into the barrel. Or maybe he gets the offset breaking pitch and does something with it. Like, who knows?
Which explains the tepid ovations that these Jays received. I mean, if Bo and Vlad had been hot coming off the road trip, they would have got standing O's. But those are the only 2 guys who you would normally expect to get huge ovation. Kiermaier a little bit, but he had come out earlier to get his Gold Glove award, so the fans were able to show their appreciation there. But there's not a lot of big names in that group that are going to get people out of their seats on introductions. Which if they win, I'd say if they win over 90 games by the end of the season, the crowds will be warming up again.
No question. I mean, there's a long way to go, and I'm not going to pull back from what I said before. It's because it's funny. It's like it's easy when the season starts to say, well, if they go 4-6 on the road trip, that's acceptable. And then, of course, the 10 games end and they're 4-6, and it doesn't feel quite as good because it is 6 losses in 10 games, and you've watched how the games have played out. But I'm not going to pull it. They're 5-6 as we sit here on Tuesday, April the 9th. There's so much that's going to happen, both good and bad, a lot of it indifferent, over the course of the next 151 games, that we'll see how it all plays out. But I'll repeat something I was saying last year, and that is that this team is built in the image of its front office, which pleases, I'm sure, to no end the front office. But there isn't a lot of sort of trying to decide. Personalities may be wrong because Vladdy has it when he displays it, but it feels more corporate now, and that's what they want. So they have it, but you are going to get the reactions tied to that.
Yeah.
There's doubt, and they have earned that doubt. They can allay that doubt. They can squash it. That's possible, but doubt exists right now. There's a reticence. They are harder to embrace. That's just a fact. And the responses to the coaches and players last night, and I know Pete Walker's an exception and what have you, but the responses generally last night reflect that. And, lecturing the audience that they need to feel differently is not how this is going to get solved.
Yeah, this Blue Jays fan base is not a run prevention, deep middle relief fan base. They don't respond outwardly to nuance. They're looking for home runs. They're looking for pitchers that are just dominating, starting pitchers especially. And they don't want to win 2-1. They want to crush the opponent. And that's not, when you get 0, 2, and 0 runs in Houston, that's difficult to watch on TV. I'm
sure look generally hopeless in the process.
Yeah. I'm sure
they had one hit in 2 games in Houston, Griff. One hit.
Well, that's like at Dodger Stadium, Expos, and Dennis Martinez threw his perfect game on that Sunday afternoon. On Friday night, everyone forgets that Mark Gardner threw a 9-inning no-hitter against the Dodgers, and the Dodgers won it in the 10th. It was a 0-0 game going to 10, but the Dodgers were no-hit on Friday. Perfect game done Sunday. And Dennis Martinez, we flew to San Francisco right after the game, and he had a 7:30 a.m. Eastern time appearance on the Today Show. I think Bryant Gumbel was hosting, and I said, Dennis, they're asking for you at 7:30 a.m. You think you want to do it? And he went, yeah, I'll do it. And he shows up at 4:30 in the lobby of the hotel. I've been out drinking with Elliot Price all night, and so I'm there to sort of help him. And he's in his shirt and tie and jacket because he had given up drinking in 1987, I think.
Oh, so he had gone to bed and woken up. I was going to ask.
He went out with his the Nicaraguan broadcaster for the Giants, they were celebrating, and talking, and they were buddies. And so Dennis's solution to showing up in the lobby at 4 a.m. was to do that. And my solution was to go see, I don't know, Carol Doda or somebody. I don't know. but it was ugly. Lucky I didn't have to go on camera.
What's that retching noise off camera in the background?
But yeah, getting no hit 2 out of 3 games, was very familiar to me. Although the Gardner didn't turn out that well.
But Griff, to be serious, and this, it's not like I'm pointing anything out that isn't obvious, but it goes back to last year's offensive struggles, right?
Oh yeah.
The decision has been made because it's been shown that the issues lie offensively with this team. And the solution in the offseason was to remove a singular coach, offload him to the complex in Florida, Dave Hudgens, and either bring people in or give people different titles. And it's all about how we strategize differently and present the information differently to the very same players.
Yeah. To make those personnel changes, and then to let Matt Chapman, Brandon Belt, and Whit Merrifield go.
Right. So,
and then replace them with
Isaiah Connor
versions of those players.
So it's just,
we haven't about Daniel Vogelbach, his base running.
Yeah. Okay, what do you want to talk about?
Just that
Daniel, even when the ball's hit behind you on the shortstop side of second base
Hey.
and you're in second, you're not taking third, Daniel. I mean, have a chat with Alejandro Kirk about what it's like to not do that, because you guys are not winning a tortoise race.
And in this 2 innings later, Ernie Clement hits a ball in the hole. It's going to be a base hit. And the shortstop stands up, realizes he can't throw to first, and still has time to throw to second base and get the force on Vogelbach sliding in. I mean, that's a base hit. It should be listed as a base hit for Ernie Clement, but instead it's an out, 0-for-1 fielder's choice at second base, and Vogelbach's chewing gum on his way back to the dugout.
Right, and and
Joey Votto is hitting off a tee now.
Yeah. And Votto did a number on that ankle, Griff, and it's playing out. The proof
I
is
told
now.
you about my catcher that stepped on it, and he was out for a long time. Same thing, just stepped on a bat that was lying around in a game, and he didn't play for a while.
Yeah, I had a
He
chance to talk to.
Years old.
Yeah, I had a chance to talk to somebody about a week and a half ago who knows Joey, and said this wasn't just like a casual thing. Like he did a number on it, and as it's playing out right now, the target is sometime in May, and that's the hope, right? And that it's going to be that way. He's just hitting off a tee now. He's going to have to get some minor league games in, or extended spring if they keep him down in Florida, whatever the case may be, before he comes up. But Vogelbach. The other thing, Griff, and we talked about this, is like he's not playing first base. So he's a bat off the bench. So he's your lefty bopper who could conceivably hit a pinch hit home run, or, put one in the gap at a big time pinch hit. But like he's not going to start, because you can't afford to not have Justin Turner in the lineup. And if Vogelbach's playing, he's DHing, which puts Turner at third. And we've already seen early this season that you want to sort of manage that.
To me, that's a reason, because you look at the bench and you got Brian Serven, who can't do anything except try and help a pitcher through a game, but he's not even an exceptional defender. And you have Vogelbach. So you got basically a two-man bench, and they're part-time starting players, the other two guys. So it's really still a bench that could use a lot of work. Danny Jansen coming back is so important to this team. Mm-hmm. It gives you not only a really good defensive catcher, but a guy with some power, lengthens the lineup, and gives you a bat off the bench late in games, which is something that they've been struggling with. So
and obviously on nights Kirk starts, you can pinch run for him in the seventh, knowing that Jansen's taken over. That if the game does go into extra innings and that spot in the lineup comes up again, it's not Serven, it's Jansen.
Right.
In that scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've pretty much run the course. Are we close to an hour right now?
We are close to an hour. I think we covered all the hard hitting topics.
Like I'm just a discussion before we go about the March Madness. It's now April, but it's still March Madness. And how I picked UConn to win the whole thing. There you go.
Well, pat on the back.
However, guessing
you weren't the only one, though.
My other three Final Four teams were down the track a long way back. But it was funny going in the clubhouse after the game last night. Second half was still on of the final, and Kiermaier. I wanted to talk to Kiermaier about his throw to third, but he was sitting on the sofa watching this 70-inch TV, and because he's a Purdue guy, he's a Boilermaker, and I didn't want to interrupt him. I knew I wouldn't get a good answer if I did, but and then you had your UConn guys and Pete Walker, and I think there's
Springer is a Connecticut guy, but he went to UConn.
Yeah, and so it was. I'm interested to see how Kiermaier performs after his beloved Boilermakers went down hard last night.
Well, Kevin Kiermaier and Drew Brees are drowning their sorrows today, right? I can't think of any other Boilermakers, and that's bad because I'm sure there are other famous ones, but Drew Brees tops that list for me.
Rick
Sure.
Mount. I remember when the last time Purdue won the national title in 1970, I was watching that game, and Rick Mount was their blonde, typical Indiana point guard, and he called in the officials because he thought that one of the baskets was 2 inches too low. And turns out he was dead right. And I'm going, holy
No way.
he he was a good shooter, but he never made much of a name for himself in the NBA. But that was one of the, I'm still remembering it 54 years later. So that must impress the hell out of me as a 16-year-old.
Just say, Griff, if your name is Rick Mount, it's best that of all the names that can be used for Richard, you stick with Rick. Stick with stick with one of the ones that starts with R.
On that note, I think
stick with one of the ones that starts with R.
Mhm.
So we're just we're going to continue to roll now. Look, as I said, I'm back in the GTA and some personal stuff going on with a dear friend. So Griff and I are committed to going live. YouTube.com/Exit Philosophy after some select Blue Jays games. I know we've promoted that through the winter, and we have not forgotten. It's just there's life is happening on our end right now, so that will happen as we move forward here, and we'll keep you in tune as to when those dates will be, and we'll look for some interaction. We'll get the chat going. YouTube.com/Exit Philosophy, where you can also watch this podcast. And griffsthepitch.com is where you can get all of Griff's written work. The Exit Philosophy podcast is linked. Griff has conversations with current and former Blue Jays and some Montreal Expos greats that you'll really enjoy. Those are archived. So if you're a new subscriber to griffsthepitch.com, you can go back and listen to a lot of those. You go out for walks, you go to the gym, do whatever you do, commutes to work, home from work. Those are great places to listen to some of those chats. So griffsthepitch.com for all of that. The Blue Jays' first homestand will continue, and we will be back next week on Exit Philosophy.
Thanks, Scotty. Thanks, everyone, for listening.